The pounding on my front door didn't sound like a neighbor. It sounded like a warning. 3 heavy blows, then the crackle of a radio and a low male voice outside my apartment. I was still half asleep, barefoot on cold laminate, when I pulled the door open and saw the uniform. A deputy sheriff stood in the hallway, tan shirt perfectly pressed, dark vest, metal badge catching the weak hallway light. His boots squeaked on the worn linoleum as he shifted his weight. Already looking like this was one more stop on a long morning route. In one hand he held a clipboard, in the other a folded packet with a bright red, "Not a seat of the hut," stamped across the top. "Morning," he said, not sounding like it was. "Are you my full name?" My throat was dry. "Yes." He checked the clipboard, then met my eyes with a practiced, flat expression. "I'm here to serve you with an eviction order. You've got 7 days to vacate unless the court says otherwise." The word "viction" didn't make sense at first. It floated over my head, disconnected from my life. Then he was holding out the packet, and I could see the official court stamp, the case number in the corner, a judge's name in neat black ink, and a hearing date already printed like this had been decided without me. On the outside, I nodded and took it. Inside, ice. My rent is auto-paid. My lease is current. I work, I budget. I don't ignore notices because I've spent my whole adult life terrified of ending up back under my parents' roof. And that's exactly who flashed into my mind: my mother, pursed lips and concerned eyes, my father, always reminding me he knew more about how the system works. "I've never missed a payment," I heard myself say, my voice too high. He gave a small shrug that told me he'd heard every excuse. "Ma'am, the landlord of record is within their rights. If you think it's wrong, you take it up with housing court. My job is just to serve the order. Landlord of record." The phrase rang wrong. My landlord was a faceless management company that emailed me receipts and renewal offers. I looked down at the first page, scanning for the name of the company, the corporate logo. Instead, under plaintiff, owner, were 2 names in bold capital letters, my parents' full legal names, followed by their suburban address. For a second, the hallway tilted. The deputy's radio crackled again, someone saying something about being en route, and the smell of someone's coffee drifting from the stairwell suddenly made me nauseous. I blinked and forced my eyes back to the page. Per the attached notice to quit served 30 days ago. The deputy read over my shoulder, tapping the line with his pen. "That's your prior warning." "I never got a notice," I said automatically. He flipped the packet and pointed to a smaller page behind the main order. "Says here you did. Has your signature and everything." There, near the bottom, was a scrawled name that vaguely resembled mine if you squinted through a fog. Except I knew my own handwriting. I signed my name 100 times a year, on HR forms, on delivery tablets, on bank slips. My G curves up and back, this one dropped down like a hook. The date next to it was circled a Tuesday. I had been at my desk that entire day, an hour away in another city. My heart thudded. Someone had signed for me. In the space of a breath, my mother's last text replayed in my head. "You'll see we were right about that apartment. It's not safe for you." Typed like a worried parent, but I knew her well enough to hear the satisfaction under the words. She never liked that I'd signed this lease without begging her to co-sign. My father's voice layered on top of it. "Just list me as your emergency contact for the lease. It's practical. If anything happens to you, they'll know who to call." I'd finally sent him a copy of my lease months ago after he pestered me for records. The deputy shifted again, glancing at his watch. "Look," he said, softening a little when he took in my face. "The writ of possession has already been requested. That's the document that lets us physically come back and remove you and your belongings after the date listed there, okay? Unless a judge pauses it, this is active." "Requested by who?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. On paper, apparently, my parents now owned my home. "As far as the court's concerned," he said, tapping the plaintiff line again, "them. You want to fight it? You'll need to go down to the housing court clerk today, file your response. They'll explain the process. But from our side, it's in motion." He had a few more things to say about timelines and contact numbers, but they blurred. I thanked him on autopilot and closed the door as gently as my shaking hands would let me. I stood there in my tiny entryway, bare feet on the mat, eviction order glued to my fingers. The official seal, the judge's name, the fake signature, my parents' names sitting where my landlord should be. It all screamed the same thing. Somewhere, somehow, they had turned themselves into my landlords on paper without me signing a single thing. And if the court already believed that, I needed to find out exactly how they'd pulled it off before the system finished what they started. I didn't understand how far my parents would go with paperwork until I saw their names printed as my landlords. But the pattern had been there my whole life. I grew up in a small town where everyone thought my parents were saints. My father did books for half the local businesses, the man people trusted with their taxes and ledgers. My mother ran church committees, organized food drives, brought casseroles when someone was sick. People called them respectable, frugal, helpful. Inside our house, that helpfulness had strings attached to everything, especially housing and money. A roof over my head, gas in my tank. Even the phone I used were all leashes they held tightly in their fists. When I was 19 and desperate to move out, my mother sat at the dining table with a pen poised over my first lease, beaming. "Of course I'll co-sign," she said. "We just want you safe." 2 weeks after I moved in, she was letting herself into my place unannounced because she had a key in case of emergencies. If I didn't answer her late night calls, she would show up in person. When I pushed back, she didn't raise her voice, she lowered it. "Paperwork is power," she told me once, almost kindly. "We're on the lease. You're not. Don't forget that. It wasn't just leases." My parents opened a joint emergency account in my early 20s, talking about responsibility and savings. I deposited most of my part-time paychecks into it. The month I started dating someone they didn't approve of, the balance went from 4 figures to almost nothing overnight. My father shrugged when I confronted him. "Our names are on the account," he said. "You should have thought of that before making reckless choices." They always wrapped control in morality. "We're just protecting you. We know how these things work better than you." Anytime I tried to act like an adult, they'd threaten to talk to the bank or call your boss and let them know what's really going on. I still remember standing outside my dorm, phone pressed to my ear, listening to my mother boast that she had called my college's financial aid office pretending to be me to adjust my loan disbursement. Her interference almost cost me my on-campus housing. When I panicked, she sighed like I was exhausting. "If I hadn't stepped in, you'd be homeless. You should be grateful." Each time I caved, I apologized. I told myself I was overreacting. Because on paper, they'd always given themselves leverage first. Co-signer, joint owner, emergency contact. I was just the name in the middle. Eventually, I clawed my way out. I moved to the city, took the first steady office job that would have me, and bounced between roommates until I could afford a tiny one-bedroom. Signing that lease in my own name, with no co-signer, felt like stepping onto dry land after years of treading water. I waited until the ink was dry and the keys were in my hand before I told them. My father's smile on the phone was too tight. "You should have let me look at the contract first," he said. "Landlords take advantage." My mother layered concern over judgment. "At least send us a copy, so we know you're not being scammed," she insisted. I emailed a redacted PDF, blacking out the landlord's address and some details, thinking I was being cautious. They started making little digs during every call. "You're wasting money on rent. That neighborhood is dangerous. If you lose this place, don't expect us to bail you out again." There were warning signs I filed under annoying instead of dangerous. Months ago, my mother asked, sweetly, "Did you ever add us as authorized contacts for your landlord? It would make things smoother if something happens to you." I said no. My father had another angle. "If you ever want to buy, I can structure something so the property is in our name, but you live there, cheap. It's just paper." I laughed it off, told him I wasn't ready for that. Later, when I was organizing my digital files, he texted that his printer had messed up the lease PDF and asked for a cleaner copy. I sent it, not thinking that a clear, unredacted lease in his hands was another loaded weapon. Now, sitting at my wobbly kitchen table with the eviction packet spread out beside my original lease, I could see exactly how they'd loaded it. The plaintiff section on the court form named my parents as successors in interest to the property, and clipped behind it was a document I had never seen before. Quitclaim assignment of lease and rents. According to that paper, my building's real landlord had assigned all rights to my unit, my rent, my tenancy, to my parents in exchange for a token amount. It had a notary stamp, a fake-looking signature from the owner, and a county date stamp from 2 months ago. Behind that, another page, a 30-day notice to quit for non-payment, stating I owed 2 months of rent I knew I had already paid, citing the wrong rent amount from before my last lease renewal. Near the bottom, another sloppy, received, signature that allegedly belonged to me. My heart hammered, but my hands slowed. Panic wasn't going to help. Paperwork got me into this. Paperwork could get me out. I pulled out my phone and started snapping photos of every single page, zooming in on the mismatched dates, the shaky signatures, the notary's commission number. I opened my banking app and scrolled through 12 months of rent payments, each one clearing to the property management company, never to my parents. Screenshot, swipe, screenshot. Transaction IDs, confirmation emails, timestamps. Then my eyes caught a single line on the assignment document, buried under legal jargon. Recorded with the county recorder's office under instrument. Fenchen number. Recorded. That meant this wasn't just a lie in my kitchen. It had been ingested by the system. As far as the county was concerned, my parents already had rights over my home. If I didn't move fast, the paper trail would finish erasing me as a tenant before I ever got to speak. I shoved the packet and my lease into my bag, grabbed my keys, and took one last look around my apartment. The plants I'd chosen, the secondhand couch I'd hauled up 3 flights alone. Then I locked the door behind me and headed out, already planning my first 2 stops, the housing court clerk, and then the county recorder's office, where this whole mess had been made real. The courthouse smelled like burnt coffee and old paper, the kind of air that makes you want to whisper, even if no one told you to. I got there right when the doors opened, clutching the eviction packet so hard the edges dug into my palms. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, washing everything in a sickly yellow. A line of people snaked down the corridor, some in work uniforms, some in hoodies, all of us holding folders like life rafts. A grim laminated sign on the wall pointed the way. Evictions and landlord, tenant room 284. No decoration, no softening, just a fact. Inside, rows of hard plastic chairs faced a bank of windows, each with a small sign, clerk. I took a ticket from the dispenser, number 37, and sat down. The number display clicked from 24 to 25 while I tried to steady my breathing and rehearse what I'd say. This is fraud. I've paid my rent. My parents are not my landlords. I opened the packet again, tracing the judge's name, the case number, my parents' names where my landlords should have been. Every time I looked at my supposed signature on the fake notice, my stomach flipped. I kept seeing my mother's tight smile, my father's lectures about how the system works. They had always warned me that paperwork had power. I'd never thought they'd try to bury me with it. When my number was finally called, I walked up to the window on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. The housing court clerk was a woman in her 40s with her hair pulled back and reading glasses dangling from a chain. She took my packet, glanced at the top page, and tapped the case number into her terminal with an expression that said this was just another file. "Okay," she said, voice neutral. "You're the defendant. You've got a hearing in 5 days." The word, defendant, sank in. "There's a mistake," I said, forcing my tone to stay even. "My actual landlord is a property management company, not the people listed as plaintiffs. Those are my parents." That made her pause. Her fingers, which had been moving at a steady rhythm over the keyboard, sped up. She frowned slightly, eyes scanning the screen. "Well, according to the file," she said, There's a recorded transfer of interest. It's unusual, but not impossible. A transfer of interest. The quitclaim assignment I'd seen at my kitchen table an hour earlier. Can I see what you have? I asked. She nodded, hit a few keys, and the printer beside her whirred to life. She handed me a small stack of papers through the slot the formal complaint with my name at the top under Defendant. The transfer document, the 30-day notice, and something I hadn't seen before, a ledger and a declaration. According to the ledger, I had stopped paying rent 3 months ago and had ignored repeated attempts to redirect payments to the correct account. The declaration, signed by my father as authorized agent, stated that I had refused to communicate, might be in mental distress, and that they were acting only out of concern for the property and the community's safety. Reading those words, written in my father's stiff, familiar phrasing, felt like a slap. White, hot rage flared under my ribs, tangled with a humiliation so deep I could taste it. My own parents had stood in front of a court and suggested I was unstable to speed up an eviction. The clerk must have seen something shift in my face, or noticed how my hands shook as I held up my own lease and a thick sheaf of printed bank statements. Look, I said quietly, sliding them towards the glass. I've paid every month. These are my receipts. This is my lease. They are not my landlord's. She studied the documents for a moment, then her expression softened by a degree. Okay, she said, lowering her voice. I can't give you legal advice, but I can tell you procedure. I clung to that word. Procedure. Right now, the case is active, she continued. You have a hearing in 5 days. If you do nothing, they can get a default judgment, and then the writ of possession will issue. That's when the sheriff can physically remove you. Once that happens, reversing it is very hard. You'd have to file motions, maybe even appeal. It's better to challenge the documents now. She reached under the counter and pulled out several packets of paper, rubber, banded together. You can file an answer, she said, handing me the first pack. That's where you respond to every allegation, admit, deny, or state you don't know. Be specific. Deny their facts. Attach your bank records and lease. She added another bundle. This is a motion to stay the eviction. Ask the judge to pause enforcement. And this is an ex parte application to stay the writ in case one gets issued before the hearing for some reason. It felt like she was pouring a foreign language into my hands, but underneath the fear was relief. There was a path, however narrow. You mentioned a transfer? I said. The assignment of lease. I don't think the landlord really signed it. She nodded slowly. You might want to go to the county recorder's office and the notary registry to verify it, she said. If there's forgery, that's serious. Judges like documentation from other agencies. She tapped something else on her screen, then glanced up. Our system logs who files what and when, she added. If your parents filed anything here personally, there's a signature card and ID scan on file. Can you see that? I asked. She hesitated, then turned the monitor slightly so I could glimpse it without fully breaching whatever rule she was stretching. On the electronic filing log, I saw the date the complaint had been opened. 3 weeks ago. Next to filer, it read authorized agent, my father's full name. A thumbnail image showed a scanned driver's license, his face staring back at me in DMV lighting, and an electronic signature acknowledging the filing. My stomach twisted. He had stood in this building, in this line, and calmly set the trap. The clerk leaned a little closer to the glass. There's also a note, she said quietly. Tenant's mental health concerns. Plaintiff requested expedited hearing to prevent disturbances. She gave me a look that was part sympathy, part warning. That flags the sheriff to treat it as potentially volatile. Suddenly, the deputy's careful tone at my door made terrible sense. On paper, I wasn't just a non-paying tenant. I was a problem, a risk, someone whose own parents claimed she couldn't be trusted. I swallowed hard. So if I fill these out, I asked, tapping the answer in stay forms, and get proof from the recorder that the transfer is wrong, I have a chance. She nodded. File your answer as soon as you can, before the hearing date. Attach everything. Then go today to the recorder's office. If that transfer is bogus, get something from them in writing. Judges like documents. I thanked her, gathered the stack of forms in my bruised, looking eviction packet, and stepped back out into the hallway. The air felt thinner, the fluorescent buzz louder. 5 days until the hearing, and if a writ slipped through before anyone listened, the sheriff could be back at my door with the authority to empty my life onto the curb. On the courthouse steps outside, I texted my supervisor, "Legal emergency. I may need a couple of days. I'll bring documentation." Then I took a breath, tightened my grip on my bag, and headed toward the county recorder's office, knowing that whatever their system showed about my parents' ownership would either finish burying me or finally prove they'd lied. The county recorder's office felt like the backstage of the whole property system. No drama, just plexiglass, muted voices, and rows of old computer terminals where people silently searched records. No one here cared about my parents or my past. They cared about instrument numbers and dates. I walked up to the counter and slid the transfer document across, my finger underlining the tiny line that had appended my life. "Hi, I need to see whatever you have on file for this instrument number," I said, reading it carefully. I added my ID to the stack, my hand only shaking a little. The clerk was young, maybe late 20s, with earbuds dangling around his neck and the bored look of someone who expected everything to be routine. He typed the number in with one hand, eyes on the screen. "Okay, give me a second," he mumbled. Then something on the monitor made his eyebrows lift. His posture changed almost imperceptibly. "Huh," he said. This was recorded in person, interesting. He angled the monitor slightly away, like instinct told him to shield it. "Let me pull the original scanned document," he added, already clicking through to another screen. A printer behind him rattled to life. He walked over, grabbed the warm pages, and laid them next to the copy my parents had used in the eviction complaint, the one I'd brought from court. At first glance, they looked similar, but side by side, the differences popped. On the recorded version, the notary's seal was crisp and dark. On my version, it was faint, almost like a bad photocopy. The date under the owner's signature was written slightly differently, the slant of the numbers off. The owner's signature itself looked shaky and uneven on the transfer, nothing like the bold, confident lines you'd expect from someone who'd signed 1,000 documents. "Can you see who brought this in?" I asked, forcing my voice to stay casual. He nodded, turning back to his computer. "Yeah, we log all walk-ins. Give me a second." His fingers moved more deliberately now. He squinted at the screen, then read aloud, "Submitted by Ham, my mother's full name, presenting ID as authorized representative of the property owner." My breath caught. My mother had never had any relationship with my landlord beyond whatever she pieced together from the lease I'd stupidly sent. The clerk lowered his voice a notch, as if crossing some invisible line between standard help and actual assistance. "Our system time, stamps entries and records the counter used," he said. That day, the front counter camera was active. If law enforcement requests, they can see exactly who was here. The idea of my mother standing right where I was, smiling pleasantly as she slid forged documents under the glass, made my skin crawl. He clicked to another screen. "We also have prior documents from the same owner on file," he muttered. "Let me see." He pulled up a previous deed of trust and printed the signature page, then put it beside the transfer. Even to my untrained eye, the mismatch was obvious. The genuine signature from the deed was fluid, consistent. The one on my transfer looked like someone had tried to imitate it from memory and failed. "These signatures don't look alike," he said, frowning. I took a breath and laid everything on the counter. The eviction order, my lease, my screenshots of bank payments to the management company. I explained, as calmly as I could, how my parents' names had appeared as plaintiffs, how they'd used this transfer to claim they owned my lease and that I wasn't paying them. The clerk listened, then straightened. "Hang on," he said. "I'm going to get my supervisor." A few minutes later, an older woman in a navy cardigan came to the window, the kind of person who looked like she'd seen every scam the county had to offer. The younger clerk briefed her quickly, then stepped back so she could take over. "Let me see everything," she said. She didn't rush. She compared the alleged owner's signature on the transfer to the one from the prior deed, line by line. She studied the notary's seal and commission number, then turned to her own terminal and entered it into a state notary database. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "This commission expired last year," she said finally. She tapped the transfer with one finger. "Your document is dated 2 months ago." A different kind of chill ran through me. Not the helpless kind from my kitchen that morning, but something sharper. Confirmation. Her face hardened. "That's notarization fraud at minimum," she said. "And if someone filed a false property transfer to evict a tenant, that's beyond our office. We'll need to flag this and notify county council." I swallowed. What does that mean for me? There's already an eviction case. She shifted into a tone that was all business, but there was a thread of reassurance in it. "I can print a certification of recorded documents that notes the irregularities," she said. "It will show that this transfer is under internal review for possible fraud. I'll also prepare an internal memorandum stating that we've notified county council and are treating this instrument number as disputed." She typed rapidly, the printer chattering again. A moment later, she handed me a stamped certification and a copy of the memo. "Take these to your housing court hearing," she said. "In the meantime, I'm placing an administrative hold on any further actions involving this instrument. That means, in our system, it's marked as disputed. No clean chain of title flowing from it until this is resolved." She glanced at the log one more time. "And yes, the front counter camera was active that day," she added. "If the judge or law enforcement requests footage, we'll cooperate fully." For the first time since the deputy knocked on my door, I felt the ground under me solidify a little. The same system my parents had tried to manipulate was now, quietly, methodically, turning its gaze on them. 5 days later, I sat in a small housing courtroom, the hum of the air conditioner filling the silence before the judge walked in. My parents were at the plaintiff's table, dressed neatly, hands folded, performing concern. My mother met my eyes once and gave me a tiny, rehearsed wince, like she was already the wounded party. The judge, in a simple black robe, called the case. My parents went first. My mother spoke softly about how I had struggled with finances and mental health, how they had reluctantly stepped in to take over the lease to protect the property after my repeated non-payment. My father backed her up, talking about responsibility and community standards, like this was a favor they were doing. Then the judge turned to me. My voice shook on the first sentence, but steadied as soon as I started handing over my stack, my original lease with the management company, 12 months of bank statements showing rent paid in full, the recorder's certified memo and internal note, printed screenshots of rent confirmations. "Your Honor," I said, forcing myself to speak slowly, "I have never missed a rent payment. The supposed ownership transfer my parents used to file this case is based on a fraudulent filing with an expired notary commission. The county recorder's office has flagged it for investigation and placed an administrative hold on that instrument number." The judge sat back and took his time reading. He compared the signatures, the notary information, the recorder's certification. Then he looked at my parents. "How did you come to own an interest in this property?" He asked my father. "Why does the notary's commission on this transfer show as expired before the date it was allegedly signed? And why does the landlord's signature here not match their signature on prior county records?" My father's confidence faltered. "It must be a clerical error," he said quickly. We trusted the notary. We were just trying to help our daughter. My mother's eyes filled with instant tears. "She's always been ungrateful," she said, voice trembling. "She twists everything. She's paranoid, Your Honor, we were only—" The judge held up a hand, cutting her off. His face remained neutral, but his tone cooled. "Ma'am, this isn't about family dynamics. This is about the validity of documents filed with this court and with the recorder." He turned to the clerk beside him. Please note the recorder's memorandum in the file. The transfer appears invalid pending investigation by County Council. He faced us again. Given the evidence, he said, the plaintiffs have failed to establish a valid ownership interest in the property or a lawful basis for this eviction. The complaint is dismissed with prejudice as to the defendant. He paused, then added, and I am ordering that a copy of this proceeding, along with the recorder's memo, be forwarded to the district attorney's office for possible review of fraud and perjury. For a heartbeat, the room went silent. Then my lungs remembered how to work. I hadn't just avoided eviction. For the first time, my version of reality was the one written into an official record. Outside in the hallway, my parents moved fast. My mother grabbed my arm, nails biting through my sleeve. "You've ruined the family," she hissed. "You made us look like criminals." I pulled my arm back and held up my phone, thumb hovering over the record button I'd already tapped before walking out. "This conversation is being recorded," I said quietly. "Any further harassment will go to the DA along with everything else." Something in my father's face shuddered. My mother's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. As I walked away, the decision settled in my chest like a weight and a relief at once. They would never again be near my housing, my accounts, or any document with my name on it. They had crossed from controlling into criminal, and I was done pretending that was normal. Back home, closing the door to my still, secure apartment, I finally let myself exhale and started planning what came next: locks, passwords, emergency contacts, every boundary I should have put in place years ago. Back on my couch, the same walls that felt like they were closing in on me days ago finally feel earned. I sit with a mug of tea cooling in my hands, the eviction order and the court dismissal laid out on the coffee table like before and after photos of my life. On one side, their story: unstable, non-paying, ungrateful. On the other, the judge's signature, the recorder's memo, the DA referral. My reality in ink. I think about how many times my parents said, "It's just paperwork," while sliding forms in front of me, opening joint accounts, putting their names on my leases and school records. Paperwork was never just anything to them. It was a leash. This time, for once, their own paper trail wrapped around them instead of me. The next morning, I call my actual landlord. My voice is steady as I explain the fraudulent transfer, the dismissed eviction, the recorder's investigation. I email over the court order and the certified memo. A few hours later, the property manager replies with a short, professional message confirming they've added a note to my tenant file: no third party changes or contacts without written consent from tenant. One sentence that would have saved me years of grief. With their blessing, I schedule a lock change and stand in the hallway while a maintenance tech swaps out the deadbolt. Inside, I sit down at my laptop and start methodically closing doors they used to walk through. New email passwords, new bank logins, fraud alerts placed with all 3 credit bureaus, in case they get creative with my social security number. I pull up my HR portal at work and remove my parents as emergency contacts, replacing them with a friend who actually shows up when I call. I call my doctor's office and my bank and do the same. I update my beneficiary designations, clearing their names from every form where they were once default. Anywhere a system asks, "Who should we contact?" I make sure the answer is no longer them. Then I block their numbers. For the first time, it isn't a threat or a dramatic gesture. It's a safety measure. When relatives text, confused by whatever version of the story my parents are spinning, I send the same line: "There's a legal matter involving property fraud. I won't be discussing it, but I am going no contact for my safety." Some push back. Most go quiet. I let them. Life doesn't turn into a movie. Ending montage. My job is still stressful. My rent is still high. And I still wake up some nights thinking I hear that knock at the door. But the balance has shifted. They may keep lying about me to whoever will listen, but now, in the places that actually matter. Courts, county offices, my tenant file, the notes in black and white describe their behavior, not mine. There's a strange calm in knowing I can use the same systems they weaponized, but in the open with documents, timelines, and signatures that are actually mine. A few weeks later, a thin envelope from the county recorder arrives in my mailbox. Inside is a short letter confirming that the transfer linked to my parents has been marked void pending further legal action. Tucked behind it is a form from the district attorney's office, asking if I'd like to submit a victim impact statement as they review the case. I fold the letter and slide it into the folder with my court order and the clerk's notes. In my family, they always believed that a signature could erase me. This time, it erased their lies instead. If you've ever had a toxic parent, boss, or relative try to use paperwork or the system against you, know this: you're not crazy, and you're not alone. Documentation and calm persistence can change everything. If you like these kinds of justice stories, consider subscribing so you don't miss the next one. And tell me in the comments, which country are you watching from, and what kind of toxic or justice situation would you like to see us cover next?